My mum still thinks I can't cook. When I go to mum's house, I literally am put in a corner. I pick and wash herbs. I slice spring onions, but I still do that wrong. I cannot touch the proteins and don't even come close to the broths. My mum knows I had restaurants. I have the restaurant in the Glen where my mum visits me quite often, but still thinks I can't cook.
This is The Crackling. I'm Anthony Huckstep. After years of plying her trade, learning many different cuisines, Jerry Mai embarked on a journey in Melbourne to explore the authentic flavours and combinations of her Vietnamese heritage. And the impact on Melbourne's culinary landscape has been monumental. Jerry, tell us about the decision to go out on your own for the very first time.
In hindsight, I was crazy. Should have never done that. After a pandemic, absolutely ludicrous. I should not have done that at all. Look, it was fantastic. You know, I'd been very fortunate to cook a lot of Southeast Asian cuisines, and being Vietnamese, I had an unfair advantage of the food and the understanding of the culture as well. And we forget how cultural food is. You know, in Vietnam, you eat certain dishes at certain times, celebration or during mourning. And I just wanted to share that. I mean, we scratched the absolute surface of Vietnamese food when I opened Phở Nom in Emporium, which almost feels like 2 lifetimes ago. And we absolutely just scratched the surface of pho, bánh mì, and rice paper rolls and some bún and things like that. And, you know, I was so excited to do it at the time. I still am very excited about it. Just to introduce, I think, entry level. I always call it entry level Vietnamese. This one time I went to Vietnam and I had this street food. So I'm back in Australia, so I want to try it again. So that was my entry level. And then I think we started kicking it up notch to going into Annam and trying to redefine what people's perception of Vietnamese food is or should be to what is actually eaten and served at home or in Vietnam. And by opening the beer hall, we've actually, I enjoy a lot more. It's the fun window. It's the fun, you know, when you're in Vietnam and you go to the pub or you go out for drinks, when Vietnamese people meet up and have food and drinks. This is sort of what Bia Hoi is all about. Beer towers, heaps of booze, and just nibbly foods and grilling as you eat, and also hot pots. You know, I love hot pot. I love hot pot so much that I had to open this to do hot pot. So yeah, I mean, I wanted to introduce people to do different levels of Vietnamese food and really test people in what their perception of Vietnamese food would have been.
You were born in Saigon and you came over to Australia. Take us back to the food of your from your parents and youth, and where the influences are for you.
I was born in Saigon. I've been in Australia for pretty much all of my life, but I love travelling to Vietnam, eating the street food and how the different flavours. You know, cooking in Vietnam is a lot like cooking on charcoals and smoky sort of smells, and you can sort of smell it miles away before you even see the restaurant or even see the barbecue. So that's the kind of food I grew up eating. You know, a standard barbecue in Australia is like, you know, some very dark sausages and some very dark lamb chops. You know, carbon dated back to, you know, whenever it was. Whereas Vietnamese food is more delicate than that. You know, we treat the fire a lot better into cooking the meats and things like that. So for me, and especially growing up in Queensland, we had a lot of barbecues and things like that. And actually, to this day, to most of summer, I cook outside. I use the barbecue and I cook outside. It brings the flavour in the mix so much better. And that's, I think, one thing we're doing a little bit different is to most Vietnamese restaurants where they just deep fry or pan fry a piece of chicken or meat and call it grilled, whereas we actually have charcoal or we actually cook it over the char grill. And food to me is really important. for my family. I mean, my parents worked very hard, were working a lot when they first came to this country. 2 jobs, day and night. They were tag teaming, seeing each other. I was tag teaming, getting one parent, not the other parent. And the dinner table, once or twice a week, the dinner table was where we all came together and where conversation was had, and where a lot of yelling and screaming. My wife nowadays calls it yelling and screaming. It's like, we're just talking, babe. It's just a conversation. We're just saying how much we like each other's company. So that, to me, that was food, and that was how food was not a necessity. Food was about a get-together, a gathering, and seeing both my parents at the same time.
You mentioned about just touching the surface with Vietnamese food in Australia. What's it been like translating and going deeper into Vietnamese food and putting it in the context of Australians' culinary landscape?
Look, it was a huge challenge, and I think it still is a challenge to this day. I broke someone's heart when they said they were looking forward to going to Vietnam and having chicken and cashews. And I broke his heart when I told him that dish does not exist in Vietnam. He literally was nearly in tears, because that's what he goes to his local Vietnamese restaurant and orders, Look, it is better now, looking at it back at it 10 years, 15, 20 years later. Back when I first started, the only time you would have a pho or a banh mi is if you knew someone that was in Springvale or Footscray or Richmond that was going to share it with you, or you were lucky enough to be invited to a Vietnamese family home to actually have pho or banh mi, or even a simple thing like rice paper rolls. I think with people now travelling a lot more to Vietnam and more readily available flights to Vietnam and holidays, people are more open-minded to trying more about Vietnamese food, going beyond that surface and going into, eating sea snails and bugs and things like that, grilled over charcoal. Whereas in the past, I think because it was so foreign, people were very scared. And then when we did Annam, we pushed the envelope even just a little bit more. I felt like we pushed it a little bit more. And it also took us a while to get people used to the fact that they just can't come in and have a chicken and cashew just because we're on Little Bourke Street.
You've worked at some pretty amazing restaurants, but what was the lure to work in the industry in the first place?
I think I was doomed for the industry from day one. I came from parents who left Vietnam after the Vietnam War into Cambodia and opened a small shop, a small little restaurant. They had a small little cafe when they were in a refugee camp in Thailand. And they very briefly, vaguely had a restaurant in Brisbane when I was a child. I think I just grew up with it. Food was so natural to me. Being in a restaurant was so natural to me. I remember standing on a crate trying to wash dishes, and it turns out I actually wasn't washing the dishes. It turns out I was just chipping them all. And when my mum then had exiled me to the other corner of the restaurant just to sit there. But, I think it's always been, I guess, in my blood or my family. And then, the passion, the food that the passion that my parents had for food needed to be shared. And I was just very fortunate enough to not become a lawyer and not become a doctor, and I became a chef instead.
You spent time with Long Grain and Ginger Boy and Seamstress. Tell us about that period of time and what it was like working in those restaurants.
Look, I was very fortunate to be able to get a job in those restaurants because, I sort of worked out... I started cooking in Italian food, and I worked at a place called Peroni's in South Yarra. And they had a change of chefs, which became Lotus Bar, where they started doing more sort of Southeast Asian Thai Vietnamese food. And I thought, this is perfect. This is exactly what I love. The flavours were fantastic. The technique was excellent. And I gravitated to it. So from then I worked out where I wanted to go in my career and whom I wanted to work for to make that happen. I think a lot of times in hospitality, we forget to lay a path for our career. We just blindly work from one venue to another. and become overworked, tired, and angry about the whole industry. So I planned my path out, and it seems just long grain was a fantastic experience when Martin Bowitz was there. The attention to detail, the palette, the flavour profile was exceptional, and it was leading in Thai food at the time. Apart from David Thompson and Sailor Thai in Sydney, he was laying the path for future modern future Thai restaurants. But serving very modern Thai food without compromising technique or flavour, and I was very fortunate to do that. Seamstress gave us a window into Chinese food and very delicate and braising flavours into that. And then so when I did a bit of a stint here, and Ginger Boy was taught me so much, not only in cooking, in management, and also back end. A lot of chefs don't get taught back end stuff like COGS, costings, labour costs, wastage, all that kind of stuff. A lot of time we've just been, I feel, pushed into a section, and you live or die in that section. Where Ginger Boy gave me another whole experience and gave me another whole set of tools that I could use to do what I'm doing now. I still use some of the systems that I've learnt from there. They've been very exceptional teachers to me, and I've been very lucky.
You felt the call to go to London, like many chefs do, and worked with David Thompson. What was it like working with him?
I've got to be very PC when I say this. He knows this because I say this to him as well. He is a stark raving lunatic. That's as about PC as I can put it right now. No, he is my mentor. I have learned so much in the year and a half that I was with him. I still talk to him to this day. I still call him for advice or speak to him. He, again, concreted what I learnt from long grain, that I'm not compromising in product, not compromising in flavour, not compromising in the style in which it was meant to be cooked or eaten. You're talking about fermented fish guts in a curry. We're talking about, chili that is no human should ever eat in any situation in some of these curries. And I loved it, and the flavour was so intense. Everything I thought I knew about Thai food, I had to relearn when I worked with him. And that then carried me to going to Vietnamese food. Why am I compromising? Why am I doing what my predecessors have done to Vietnamese food is, excuse my French, bastardizing it? Why am I doing that? Why am I bastardizing it for some Western palate, when really what they're asking me to do, what the Western palate is asking me to do, is giving them the experience in which they experienced when they're in Vietnam, or if they were sitting at my family's dinner table. And so with that foundation of with Thai food, I then translated that to Vietnamese food, of, how a braise should be eaten, or how fish are grilled, and how the many varieties of sauces and dipping and getting your hands involved with your food. You notice in Vietnamese food, there's a lot of hands involved, of wrapping and rolling and folding and just handling your food, and the joy of it being shared at the table. So, that was the foundation that I came home to, that I wanted to carry on with my food, and not compromising. If I don't get the right ingredient, instead of compromising, go, that will do, it won't do, it doesn't do, and we just take it off the menu.
Pork is at the heart of a lot of Vietnamese cuisine, and it's so versatile and used throughout in the different regions. Can you tell us a bit about how you use pork on your menus?
Pork is the meat that keeps on giving. Once you think it's done giving, it gives you some more. I use a lot of pork belly, crispy pork belly. I know everybody uses crispy pork belly, but we use a lot of crispy pork belly. We, as Vietnamese, we use a lot of pork belly and pork shoulders. So braising tet kho, one of my go home to my mum for dinner is tet kho, and it's pork belly braised in young coconut water and a simple sugar caramel, and you cook the pork belly off with and you top it up with coconut water. It creates a sweetness but a slightly richness in the back palate. And then some braised eggs. My mother would like to cook till the eggs are dead, and then she cooks them some more. And then if they're not grey, they're still too raw, so we cook them again. Whereas I like to soft boil my eggs and lightly fry them and add them to the tikka at the end. It just creates a little different depth of richness instead of just eating cardboard. Please don't tell her I said that. So, we use pork belly in that. We do the tikka, which is exceptional. Pork chop, a very well-known Vietnamese street dish is called com tam or com sum. It's essentially broken rice. And you basically marinate a pork chop, a thin slice of pork chop, tenderize a little bit with a meat mallet, and then marinate it with lemongrass and chili and garlic and shallots, fish sauce, sugar, or the trinity of Vietnamese flavouring, and that over charcoal. Once that flavour, that meat hits the charcoal and the fat from the pork chop starts to render out a little bit, hits the charcoal, the flavour coming back into the pork chop is exceptional. It is one of the most, it makes me drool actually even thinking about it now. And that's served with rice, fried egg, and just because there's not enough pork, we make like a pork terrine or pork meatloaf to go with that as well. So, it's just pork on pork. And then, the ever so famous northern Vietnamese dish of chả cá Hanoi, bún chả, which is vermicelli noodles with grilled pork belly, thin slices of pork belly. And they also do little, I call them burger patties, but they're just little minced meatballs. And again, over the charcoal. I remember being in Hanoi for the very first time in my early 20s. And I was walking down the street in the old quarter, and all I could smell was this fragrant charcoal, smoky, this really alluring smell. And I just followed my nose and then into a store of bún chả, which I've never had before. I'm from South Vietnam. Bún chả does not exist in southern Vietnam. It only exists in Hanoi or northern Vietnam. And I was perplexed as to how you eat it. Have you had bún chả before?
I have.
So, the whole sort of bowl soup of lip mum with the meat in it, and then everything on the side, and you basically dredge it, like dip it through the sauce and eat it.
Yeah.
Whereas in the south, we have bún, which is just a bowl and all that stuff is in it already, and you just mix it together and you eat it. Which, what we know as bún, when you go out to a Vietnamese restaurant or order bún or a Vietnamese salad, that's essentially what you get, this bowl with noodles and herbs and salad and your meat. And you mix it up and you eat it. I embarrassingly sat there and not know what to do, sitting in my own cuisine. And the Vietnamese people were looking at me like, what is wrong with this person?
Well, it's always good to take cues from the locals, particularly when travelling. But it's easy to get it wrong, particularly I've been guilty of that. With a cuisine that's so reliant or really leans on something like pork, is it important to get the right type of pork and a connection with farmers to get the product right for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So we only use female pigs. For those who don't know, female pigs don't smell as strong. I know it sounds really weird, but strong porky sort of flavour. It's very neutral. So when you cook it up, it allows it to take on the flavours of what you're cooking it with. And we go. I've spent a lot of time. Grouping to farmers markets, I would call it. I was following producers at farmers market around and going, how do you do this? What is it? How do you raise it? How can I get it? And I've been very fortunate to use Western Plain porks. I've got Bandara Berkshires, who are fantastic. And the breed is also, for us is quite important when we're using it on charcoal. It's got a nice amount of fat, keeps the pork really, really nice and moist. And the flavour, we always say chicken tastes like chicken because it's beautiful free range or been looked after chicken. Pork is the same. It has this a wonderful sweetness in the meat if you don't overcook it and turn it into rubber. It is very tender and quite a delicate piece of meat. So I spent a lot of time talking to farmers of cuts, what's in season. I try to use cuts that are, so during winter, all the braising cuts everybody wants to buy, so I'll buy the other cuts that I feel it's the chops and that kind of stuff where no one wants to barbecue. So I end up using the opposite product in that season. And then so in summer, I'll start using more shoulders and jowls and things like that, because everybody wants to have the cutlet, the racks, the loins, the pork loins on the barbecue and that kind of stuff. So I use opposite to what normally is sold during the season, so that the farmer then is able to sell pretty much all of their meat without having to put too much in the freezer or storage or sell it for a lower price.
Australia is known for some amazing produce, and the influence of Southeast Asia, the many cuisines of it, has been prolific in the last 2 decades. What's it been like with the access to ingredients vital to Vietnamese cuisine?
Oh, it's been exceptional. I remember when we first arrived in Brisbane, you couldn't find things like betel leaf or lemongrass or banana, or having banana blossom very readily, or sugarcane actually. And then being in Brisbane, you could somehow somehow my parents found a betel leaf tree plant and we grew it in the backyard, and it was just grew crazy. And so what they'd do was restaurants would come and pick what they needed and then just tie some money to the plant. If my parents weren't home, they'd just tie the money to the plant or clip it to the plant. And that's how they'd pay for it. Sugarcane, lemongrass. I remember growing up and finally getting lemongrass, my mum putting it in the ground and just shot and just grew in this huge bush. And it's been a crucial part of Vietnamese cooking, and I think this is how, this is why I think Vietnamese food is only getting better. The produce and the products that are more readily available now, going from lemongrass, betel leaf, sugarcane, vermicelli noodles. We can now get dry packets, but if in certain areas you can actually get fresh vermicelli noodles, fresh bun. There's a lot more people here that have now moved to Australia and have techniques in making really good char, which is a fish mousse, or nem nung, which is a grilled pork mince. So you can go out and readily buy these things. And for me, having a restaurant, having all these projects, I get really excited. I get really excited about, soft shell crab being available for a short period of time in Australia. You can get fresh soft shell crabs instead of the frozen stuff that comes in. There was a farmer in Queensland who was doing it. So those kind of things get me really excited, galangal and things like that. I'm looking forward to seeing if we can get, things more sort of Malaysian Thai, like ginger flower as a fresh product. There's a few people growing it in Queensland. I'm hoping, with enough demand, it can be produced, more can be produced for us compared to just frozen ginger flower. I'm looking forward to seeing white galangal, where the Thais use it as a dipping for the relishes and stuff like that. So, the scenery has changed so much from having to buy dry lemongrass, dry leaves or frozen betel leaves and things like that, and herbs. I mean, how amazing is mint, Vietnamese mint, shiso, Thai basil, all that kind of stuff at the moment. We're so lucky. We're so lucky now. I remember the first time I went to Vietnam, rambutan and lychees, we see it, we get it, it's very scarce. That was 20 years ago, and most of it came from a tin. That's how I know that fruit as. But buying it by the basket load and just sitting there chomping away at it and go, where's this all my life?
You mentioned that you've been trying to change the perception of Vietnamese cuisine down under, and also provide something that's not for the Western palate, that's really representative of Vietnam. What's your family's thoughts of your food and also the Vietnamese communities in Australia?
My mum still thinks I can't cook. I'm not even joking. When I go to mum's house, I literally am put in a corner. I pick and wash herbs. I slice spring onions, but I still do that wrong. I cannot touch the proteins, and don't even come close to the broths. Like, I just, and my mum knows I had restaurants. I have the restaurant in the Glen where my mum visits me quite often, but still thinks I can't cook because mum's cooking is better. So, we're here at Bia Hoi. The food is a lot more traditional, a lot more sort of what you find if you go to Vietnam. Like I mentioned, the pork chop. We have whole fish, prawns, stir fry with chilies and beans and peppercorn and things like that. So the Asian community out here love it. I cook a BBH, what we all know is, or bumbu hui, and our BBH is, pungent in shrimp paste and in lemongrass and in chili. And the people out here love it because it's they've eaten it, they've grown up with it, and they really, really like it. My favourite thing is when young kids bring their parents out here to eat, and they think, it's just going to be some little sort of like wish-washy sort of lost translation of Vietnamese food, and they come and they eat, and they go and they tell me they loved it and it was fantastic. It's just like they've cooked it. That to me is more than any review or Michelin guide or stars anybody or hats anybody can give me when I get someone's mum's approval in my Vietnamese cooking, or someone's grandmother. Actually, that's even better.
You mentioned you grew up in Queensland, but you've become, one of the most influential on the Melbourne culinary landscape. What do you love about Melbourne's restaurant scene?
I love that there's so much diversity in the food in Melbourne. I just came back from Sydney yesterday. I was up Sydney yesterday. I think there's so much more diversity in our food. We're more accepting. Look at how amazing sort of Szechuan or Chinese food has taken off in the last few years. That is exceptional, And when you think about it 5, maybe 8 years ago, when you talk Szechuan, people are like, nah, no, don't want to eat it. And now, we all have our favourite little Szechuan restaurants, or we have little our favourite noodle house, from China. So we're lucky, and you go down to the other end of Sydney Road up in Brunswick and so forth, and you've got all this beautiful Lebanese food up there. And, you go out towards Bentley, there's some great Greek restaurants out there. Actually, I'm in Fairfield, I've got a few good Greek restaurants. The food scene is so diverse and it's so good. And you've got the city who's got, like Nana Thai, which is very, very traditional Thai food. So I find that we have far better medium-range dining venues than I think anywhere else in Australia, and I might dare say that.
You're taking people below the surface of Vietnamese cuisine to explore more in-depth flavours, but for people that are experiencing it for the first time, well, how do you explain that, and what should they expect?
Look, I think Vietnamese food is a very delicate in its flavours. It's built on the foundation of all Vietnamese food is nước mắm, and I always say, go to a venue that uses good nước mắm. It's like going to a venue that uses really bad olive oil or extra virgin olive oil. The food's going to be heaps different in the pasta and the sauces that they make. And texture and building of the texture and profile. When you have something like a rice paper roll that's so simple, it's just a rice paper roll. But when you eat into it, you've got the soft, fluffy noodles, you've got the crispy elements of the lettuce or the bean shoots or whatever crunchy element, cucumber that they've put in there, and then the protein itself. Or having a bun sao, which is a crispy rice flour pancake, and you wrap it up with lettuce and herbs, so it's building crunchy, fragrant aromatic flavours. So I always say dive into Vietnamese food with hands first, because you're going to need them for whatever you're eating, and really experience it really well with like good fish sauce. I think some people get turned off by, if you use a squid brand fish sauce to make your nước mắm base, it's not as good as using a first press like a red boat or yusung or something like that. And be adventurous. order everything on the table, try everything at least once. There may be 5 things you like out of the 10 things you've ordered, but you've liked 5 things.
Well, that's amazing advice, and I feel like that we've only just scratched the surface with you, and we need to catch up for another episode at some stage, Jerry. We've loved having you on the Crackling, and no doubt we're going to see some more amazing things from you down in Melbourne. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Great, thank you so much for having me.
This is The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with PorkStar. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we catch up with some of Australia's best chefs and pork producers to discover what makes Australian pork so special.